Shigeo Kageyama, better known as Mob, is the strongest character and also the main character of the series of Mob Psycho 100, a series with a power system which is empowered by emotions, where they fight evil spirits which are made from the negative aspects of humanity. Those of you who have watched or read Jujutsu Kaisen will notice it sounds very similar to the power system that is cursed energy within Jujutsu Kaisen, so I figured it'd be a very good idea to put Shigeo Kageyama within JJK in order to see how strong he would be relative to the rest of the series. What rank of sorcerer would Mob be? Could he take down the disaster curses? Could he solo the entire verse? And if he can't, who could he beat? And who could he take down? Those are the questions I intend to answer today. If you're going to enjoy this video and want to see more like it, make sure to like, subscribe, and let's get on to talking about how strong is Mob compared to Jujutsu Kaisen. To start this video, I will scale Mob so we can directly compare him to JJK afterwards. For starters, Mob has 3 states of power: base, 100%, and %, which I'll now refer to as unknown % for the rest of the video. Regardless, starting at the low end for base Mob, he should bare minimum be city block level. This is due to him thinking that the random goons who work at Claw with Meganshi are more impressive than anyone in the 7th Division, and Mob was able to fight them, or at least keep up with all of them. Within the 7th Division there's a character called Ishiguro, who is capable of creating attacks similar to black holes, which were so potent it could destroy the entire underground complex they were in, requiring power equal to 28.76 tons of TNT in order to do. But of course, Mob can get higher with this. Base Mob is capable of surviving a blast from God Dimple, which the blast itself was calced out to be equal to 7.03 tons of TNT, with the higher end of this calc being 93.3 kilotons of TNT, both ranging from being able to destroy multiple city blocks to entire towns. Now I think this is a pretty safe place to have Base Mob and a pretty reasonable way to scale him, but you can get him higher than this. For starters, him and his group of friends were able to create a massive energy blast which would eclipse an entire mountain. The power required to do this would be equal to 5.38 megatons of TNT, or enough to destroy a small city. Of course, the problem with this is that Mob didn't perform the feat on his own, though equally he is the one pulling most of the weight, so you can argue it can scale to him. He also has a feat of creating a large sound, which spans over an entire city. This would require 9.19 to the power of 13 watts to pull off, which when converting to joules and in tons of TNT, you get another town level feat for Mob right there. The last way that you could scale base Mob higher is due to a feat where him and the group were able to destroy a large evil spirit, which was calced out at 647 tons of TNT or multi-city block level. The reason why this feat can be more impressive is when you consider that the monster is made up of mucus and, the size of the monster relative to the mountain and the density of it and the power required to actually destroy it. Bumping the numbers up from the multi-city block level feat to 4.58 gigatons of TNT or large island level. Of course, Mob is in a group here, but even dividing the feat by 4, since there are 4 people here, you still get 1.21 gigatons of TNT, which is still large mountain level. But as I said, this is still a high ball. Speed-wise, and base Mob should be above Shimazaki, who is capable of dodging point-blank gunfire quite casually. This feat would be at a low end equal to 5,200 miles per hour to at its highest of 60,000 miles per hour depending on interpretation. Going on to the power of 100% Mob, at lowest he's capable of destroying entire islands. This is due to the feat where he outright splits a ton of clouds, requiring power equal to 8.5 gigatons of TNT to 38.5 gigatons of TNT, both being able to destroy islands. He should also upscale from God Dimple, who in the anime was able to create shockwaves so big it eclipsed the Divine Tree, requiring power equal to 31.75 gigatons of TNT or also island level. The only real way you can get Mob higher than this at 100% is going back to a feat I mentioned previously, where Mob creates a large sound. You see, when he was going all out during this feat, when he was pushed to his absolute limits, this sound didn't just cross the city but the entire solar system, requiring energy that when converted to tons of TNT would be equal to 1.041 petatons of TNT, or enough to destroy a continent. As for speed, and 100% Mob doesn't really have many good speed feats beside maybe one, who is capable of reacting and perceiving lightning in slower motion within the clouds, requiring his speed to be at a minimum for perception speed at 26 million miles per hour. Unknown % Mob is his strongest state, but doesn't really have many feats beyond just being stronger than his 100% self. The only feat here you can use is him of destroying Mogami's realm. The problem with this is that we don't know exactly how big it is or really how it was done, which means that we have multitudes of high ends and low ends for this feat. At lowest, this is a large island level feat, being equal to 557 gigatons of TNT, and at absolute highest would be equal to 8.35 exatons of TNT, or enough to destroy multiple continents at once, so it can get kinda nuts. As for speed, an unknown % mob does have some good feats which are below lightning timing, in case you don't buy the feat from before. For starters, he's capable of making shockwaves that span across an entire city instantly. The low end would make his attacks as fast as 73,000 miles per hour, with the higher end of 147,000 miles per hour. Mob also does this to Mogami's realm as well. Depending on how big you think the realm is, this can have Mob's attacks range from 147,000 miles per hour as the same high end as before, to an absolute high end of 294,000 miles per hour. There's only one way you can get Mob faster than this, and that is due to being faster than light, which is extremely questionable. The first piece of evidence for this is scaling above Sho, who's capable of manipulating light, which Toriichiro even considers child's play. The context of this feat, however, is very important, as Sho is manipulating the refractions of light to make himself invisible and isn't literally moving as fast as light to do so. The other statement is more concrete but more questionable in my opinion, where Tsurugi states he moved as fast as light in order to reach Mob. Considering we never see Tsurugi do this, the jovial nature in which he says this, and the fact it could literally just be interpreted as a metaphor and thus not super literal, you can bring this line of questioning, or this line of scaling into question. But if you do buy this level of scaling for Mob, then this would actually apply to base Mob, due to base Mob being relative to Tsurugi, and thus 100% Mob and unknown % Mob would be much faster than light. Abilities wise, and Mob is an Esper. Even the most basic of abilities of an Esper is the abilities of telekinesis and being able to sense auras, and will be able to create his own aura as well. His psychic energy is empowered via emotions, so if there's an increase of emotions or intensity, it will increase his power. He can create force fields around him or others to protect them from oncoming attacks. He can fire energy blasts, and a pretty overpowered ability that Shigeo has is the ability to copy or mimic other psychic powers that he sees. For example, he was capable of manipulating plants after seeing a spirit do it, and was able to take his own soul out of his body after remembering an Esper could do it once. Speaking of, Mob's astral form can enter the minds of others and potentially control them, unless there's something already there which could protect them from those types of attacks. His astral state also has unique abilities, such as having regeneration, as despite being ripped to shreds, he was capable of regenerating, and also should have regeneration similar to other spirits, which can regenerate from literally being reduced to molecules and pure energy. And Mob is able to kill these things as well, meaning that he can negate such healing factors. At 100%, he can easily reflect psychic attacks and absorb energy. He's also shown capable of creating smoke, can regenerate, and heal others and himself. He's also capable of sharing memories with people as well. At unknown %, Mob becomes completely bloodlusted, and while he can't exactly think, his power more than makes up for that. Remember when I said that 100% Mob could absorb energy from people? Well, unknown % Mob does that passively, meaning that you're going to get constantly weaker while you're around him, and he's going to get constantly stronger. There's also some other minor stuff as well, such as being able to manipulate technology, electricity, air, and vibrations as well. Mob has a fair amount of resistances. As an Esper, he has a built-in resistance to mind control, possession, and empathic manipulation, and is capable of even reflecting mental attacks as well. He survives his spiritual self being ripped to shreds, implying some level of resistance to soul attacks, and is capable of regaining lost memories that had been erased from him, albeit with a bit of help. Needless to say, Mob is kind of busted, but how does he do compared to Jujutsu Kaisen? In Jujutsu Kaisen, there are three main ways you can scale the verse. The lowest end is a solid foundation that cannot really be disputed, with the mid and higher end having credence to them but being debatable, so I'll go through them. Starting at the lower end, characters in Jujutsu Kaisen at peak can destroy cities to potentially mountains. This is due to a feat where 15-finger Sukuna creates a large fire arrow and destroyed Maharaga, creating an explosion so big it would equal 2 megatons of TNT at lowest, to 56.5 megatons of TNT at highball, to then 164 megatons of TNT at highest. Of course, the only ones who scale to this level of power is Gojo, Sukuna, and debatably the likes of Yuta, along with characters on that level. But the weaker characters of this tier can only really hope to reach multi-city block level with a small town level feat in there if you really want to go there. The best multi-city block level feat is from Hanami, who has a feat of casually moving a ton of trees so fast the kinetic energy would be equal to 115.8 tons of TNT, with the small town level feat coming from Mekamaru, who blasted Panda with a power equal to 1.14 kilotons of TNT. Of course, if you lowball base Mob, he would be outclassed by even semi-grade 1 sorcerers, but if you take Mob at his higher end scaling, then it gets a bit crazy. At the mid-range for base Mob, he would already be stronger than some of the disaster curses, and would be considered very formidable, albeit not one of the strongest in the series. Mob's high-end scaling for his base state would even surpass Sukuna's fire arrow, with energy eclipsing a mountain being 2.69 times stronger than the fire arrow, with the mountain level scaling being over 7 times stronger than Sukuna's fire arrow at highest. Of course, Gojo and current Sukuna would be stronger than this version of Sukuna, but there's an objective way to have Gojo and Sukuna higher than even base Mob with this scaling. Even if you highball both base Mob and Jujutsu Kaisen here, Mob would be stronger. But what about speed? Well, at the lowest end of Jujutsu Kaisen, it doesn't get too crazy, with the best feat being 3-finger Sukuna blitzing Megami, which would require him to move 38,000 miles per hour. Sure, this is faster than the low end for base Mob, but higher end base Mob would scale higher than this. The issue is, of course, that current Sukuna and Gojo are far above this, with other characters like Toji, Maki, and other characters being on the level of being 3-finger Sukuna level. So it is really vague, but thankfully Jujutsu Kaisen does have higher levels of speed, which I'll get to talking about in the later levels of power. Regardless, Mob Psycho versus the low-end scaling for Jujutsu Kaisen does not end very pretty, with it potentially being debatable if base Mob alone could solo the verse. The only things that would be in his way are the hacks abilities of Jujutsu Kaisen, but I'll get to talking about that later on. Mid-ball ranges for Jujutsu Kaisen solidly place them at mountain busting to being able to destroy an entire island. This is due to domain expansions, where Jogo is able to create a large mountain with his domain, and Daigon is able to create a small island. The reason why this is contested is domains are considered to be the ultimate attacks, and thus do not scale to the user's normal punching power. However, there are arguments for other characters scaling to the domain, such as characters shown being able to take attacks from within the domain and even being able to break through the domain with their pure punches. I'm not going to get into that debate right now because, quite frankly, it doesn't matter. All this would do is put them above base Mob, who are at least people who are on the levels of the disaster curses, if not higher. 100% Mob would be at lowest relative to Dagon and Jogo, but at best would utterly stomp them with no difficulty. Of course, Gojo and Sukuna do stomp Jogo as well, but to an unquantifiable amount, meaning that 100% Mob having a continental level feat to pull from would essentially mean that Mob would be far stronger than the mid-ball ranges for Jujutsu Kaisen. Speed-wise, and characters on the higher tiers can reach lightning timing. This is due to a few feats, such as Toji perceiving lightning in slower motion, Maki being able to block lightning, and Hikari being able to dodge lightning or at least react to lightning at point blank. This was calced out at 3.6 million miles per hour. Of course, 100% Mob also has his lightning timing feats, so you can argue they're at least relative to the likes of Toji, Maki, and Hikari, but if you go by the numbers, then Mob would actually be faster than them, with the only ones being able to keep up debatably being Gojo and Sukuna at 100%, and unknown percent Mob would be faster than all of them with this level of scaling, meaning that he would essentially stat stop the series again. However, at the highest end, characters could destroy entire planets within Jujutsu Kaisen. This is by far the most contentious and debated scaling for Jujutsu Kaisen, but I'll present the arguments here. Firstly, Sukuna is stated capable of destroying the world, and has attack which can cut the world. Obviously, these statements on their own don't really cut for being planetary, due to the statements here could be referred to other things rather than literally the planet. However, by far the most concrete scaling for planet level is through Yuki, who can create a black hole which is outright stated capable of destroying the world if Kenjaku didn't stop it. The only reason this is debated is due to the fact that Yuki had to sacrifice her life to do this, which made it all the more powerful. But if you think that Gojo and Sukuna can upscale from this black hole, then be my guest. This would be only applied to the absolute strongest characters in the verse. So it's not like Mob would be able to, or have to deal with many of these types of characters if he had to solo the verse, but equally he wouldn't be stronger than everybody in the verse as well. Speed-wise, and the highest the characters can reach is light speed. There are a few things here to support this. Firstly, there's Gojo's Hollow Purple, which is stated to be massless. Massless things could typically move at the speed of light. However, I'm not going to get into that because I'm simply not smart enough in that area of science to know. I'm just going to say it's a possibility and not definitive. Secondly, there is Kashima's electromagnetic waves, which uses in attacks against Sukuna, who can react to them. Electromagnetic waves can travel at the speed of light, but the reason why this is debated is the legitimacy of if they're actually electromagnetic waves, since Kashimo does use sound attacks alongside them, which wouldn't be realistic. There's also then the fact that you can argue that he doesn't even hit Sukuna with electromagnetic waves attacks in the first place, but again, just throwing it out here. The best light speed feat, in my opinion, once again comes from Yuki's black hole, which is stated so fast it does not let light escape. Despite that, Kenjaku was able to react fast enough to neutralize it with a technique. Of course, he still gets caught in it, so he's not exactly faster than light, but he should at least be relativistic due to this feat in my eyes, which of course only the higher tiers of the verse can scale to, and thus would be faster than light. There's also one other feat to point out here, and it comes from Yuta and Toge dodging light pillars. The issue with this feat is that it's never actually stated in the manga or anime that these pillars are actually light. The only sources for this are the wiki and the Jujutsu Kaisen video game, which aren't exactly great sources for this. Even if you want to use video game feats, Mob himself has a moon level feat in one of his games, so if you're going to be consistent, it would only buff Mob as well. With this line of scaling, I'm not going to lie, Mob is a bit cooked in terms of stats. He is much weaker than the absolute strongest characters of the verse, even at his best, and is also much slower, meaning he would get blitzed in one shot. The only way he isn't getting blitzed himself is due to his own light speed scaling, which, in my opinion, is far more questionable than Jujutsu Kaisen's. But for argument's sake, if you do buy it, then you could argue that Mob would actually be faster than a lot of Jujutsu Kaisen, since light speed scaling can be applied to base Mob, with his transformed states being much faster. The only thing that Mob would have here is to have to rely on his hacks, which you could argue, you could possess people who aren't Sukuna's vessel, but you could also argue he would be fast enough to do so, meaning that while he is stronger than the vast majority of the verse, he wouldn't be able to solo it if used the high-end scaling specifically. But how do their hacks compare? It's an important question, since if Mob can't overcome some abilities, even at the low-end scaling for Jujutsu Kaisen, he would not be able to solo due to the fact that, they're characters with absolutely crazy hacks, which is a bit of a wild statement considering how much stronger Mob is. For starters, how cursed energy and psychic energy interact is an important thing to talk about. For starters, they're both mental energy which is formed from emotions, allowing them to see and interact with invisible entities that are literally made of energy, meaning that there is an argument to be made that their power systems are similar. This works very well for Mob, due to the fact that he can copy or mimic abilities upon seeing them. I don't think he'd be able to do crazy shit like copy Gojo's Infinity just due to how complex Infinity is, but Mob being able to mimic other characters' techniques would make him even more scary. There's then also the fact that he can possess people, which would be able to work on the vast majority of the verse. The only people who wouldn't be possessed are the likes of Toji and Maki due to their heavenly bodies, and people who hold Sukuna within them, due to Sukuna being able to hold off mental attacks and soul attacks. Speaking of, how Shigeo interacts with someone like Mahito is a very interesting discussion, because Mahito is so scary because he directly attacks the soul and cannot be killed unless you directly harm his soul. I do think that Shigeo would be able to take attacks from him due to the fact he's able to survive his own soul being torn to shreds and is shown capable of regenerating. But the question is if he is able to attack Mahito's soul, which is a bit of a problem. Shigeo can perceive and manipulate his own soul, being able to even change its shape, and can attack other similar spirits, so you can argue he can kill Mahito, but it is a bit vague seeing how Shigeo's soul stuff works, and so I can't exactly say that he'd be able to kill Mahito 100% of the time. Not to mention that 100% mob and unknown percent mob can absorb power from others in their surroundings, meaning that in fights, those who he fights are going to get weaker and he's going to get stronger. However, while the power systems being equal does help Shigeo, it's also a two-sided sword, since domain expansions are stated capable of negating cursed energy and cursed techniques, meaning that they could negate Shigeo's powers and Shigeo would be defenseless. The only argument you could really make here for Shigeo being fine is that he fought Toichiro, who has the power to take powers away, yet didn't think to even try it on Mob, implying that he could resist having his powers taken away from him. However, disabling powers and stealing powers are very different, and if someone has a domain expansion and uses it, I do think that Mob is a bit screwed. There's also then the Inverted Spear of Heaven, a weapon which can outright negate curse techniques. Of course, depending on how you scale or what scaling you agree with, Mob would blitz and one-shot people before they could use a domain expansion, but win conditions for characters do exist. But what about Maharaga, a being that can adapt to any phenomenon? Well, if you can one-shot Maharaga before it adapts to your attacks, then there's no issue to be had. The only form of Maharaga who would not be one-shot, debatably, is the one that Sukuna summons, due to the fact he's able to take a few hits from Gojo. Of course, this is only applied to the high end of Jujutsu Kaisen, which would already place Maharaga above Mob, so he isn't really even going to need adaptation within that scenario. Other scaling for Jujutsu Kaisen though, yeah, Mob is going to be absolutely fine with Maharaga. But of course, we have Gojo himself. Gojo's main ability allows him to create an infinite distance between him and his target, essentially creating a shield which makes him impossible to be hit by conventional attacks. His Hollow Purple as well also allows to erase things upon contact. Even downplaying Hollow Purple, it should be able to erase things on an atomic level, and even as a spirit, while Mob can regenerate from a molecular level, atoms being smaller than molecules means that Mob could just be destroyed upon being hit with Hollow Purple. Of course, that relies on scaling that would have Mob fast enough or Mob slow enough to not be able to dodge it. So if he's placed faster than Gojo and Hollow Purple, he would be able to dodge it. But of course, the question remains: can he bypass Limitless? Potentially, I think. Mob's conventional attacks wouldn't work, nor would turning into a spirit either, since other cursed spirits and even Mahito are not able to get through. But I do think that Mob's telekinesis would work just fine, since it's an ability that doesn't need to travel anywhere and just happens, meaning that Limitless might not be able to detect it and that Mob could just crush him there and then underneath the power of his psychic powers. That was a mental word salad, okay. So, yeah. Mob would solo Jujutsu Kaisen, depending on the scaling you give for both him and Jujutsu Kaisen. At best for Jujutsu Kaisen, Mob would get very far but not be able to solo the verse. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, comment below your thoughts on the topic, and I'll see you next time.